Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you so much.
Oh, great, great. Yeah, thanks for jumping on. And let's get right to it. Thanks for joining Hollywood Times and kind of sharing your thoughts on this timely topic. Obviously, it's been blowing up the Twitter sphere, and
Yeah.
everyone's talking about all the details that are coming out. So, just some background. On Friday, I did write a piece for our publication to talk about. I interviewed one of my friends who's a prop master, and right before any of the details came out, he did say the chain of command. Apparently, there should be an armorer on set, as well as I guess we found out that the AD in this case handed that directly to Alec Baldwin.
Correct, David. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that to start off. Like, where did this all go wrong, and why weren't the necessary precautions taken?
So I would say in the first thing, first of all, Mark, thanks for having me on with
Mhm.
you in the Hollywood Times. First thing I want to just say is that the loss of this person could have been avoided, right? Helena Hutchinson's, her loss is awful, has a
Terrible.
9-year-old kid, family, and essentially died because the chain of command broke apart. So let me go back to your
Mhm.
first point. First you would have a props master, and the props master would work in tandem with the armor. The armor is the person that is in charge of that work with a gun. They're checking to see what type of gun they're using, whether it's a prop gun, whether it's
Mhm.
a actual physical gun used in 1942, if it's, let's say, a period piece that have specific blanks made for it. So each model requires different levels of detail for the props master to know. That's really what their job is, in
Mhm.
tandem with the armor. The armor is the person who is specialized in that sense of knowing how to do that. Then you would pass it on to the assistant director. The assistant director, who is literally running the set, as we call them in the industry, the first AD. This was David Halls. Now,
Mhm.
David Halls has to do a check before giving it to talent, which would be cold gun. When something is called a cold gun, it means the gun is ready to be used, has been checked, it has blanks inside, it is 100% not a threat to the set, and it has been gone through at least 3 checkpoints before
Wow.
given to the talent. Okay, so he must have, in this situation, from the information that I'm gathering, must have told Alec Baldwin that it was a cold gun. And then as Alec is practicing his movement, right, when he's sitting on a pew in that scene, fires the gun, and it was not a cold gun, obviously. And we know that, obviously the director was hurt, and then killed was the assistant director, Ms. Hutchins. So that's what I would say about the
Got
chain
it.
of.
Stefano, you mentioned that it should have gone through 3 checkpoints. Can you list them one by one? What those 3 checkpoints were, and I'm assuming obviously what happened ultimately, that the ball was dropped on all 3 checkpoints.
Correct. Okay, so here's the first one. So you would have an assistant props master. That person would be the first person that would give it to the props master, who's in charge of that. That's I would say 1A and 1B. Number 2 would be the individual who is hired for guns. There's a firearms specialist for that specifically. So that would be the armor. There's other names for it in the industry
Okay.
as well. And that would be
That
sort of.
person we did identify, Stefano. It was the 24-year-old now, right? That's
Correct.
that's come out in the news. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No, go
we'll
ahead.
go back to number 3. But on point number 1A and 1B that you had said, the prop master and the assistant prop master, why are we not hearing about them?
Well, because I'm not sure, because the reality is, people are now focusing right now on her death. That's the first thing. They want to get an autopsy is the second thing. The third thing that they want to go is higher up in the chain of command. Who gave Alec the gun? because there may be a disagreement between when the gun was ready from the props master preparing it to when the first assistant director had the gun and gave it. And I'll throw some other information into you that will give some context to us. You know that about 2 or 3 years ago, David Halls, who was on the film Freedom's Path, was fired for a similar safety violation on the same thing. It was also involving a gun, also involving a misfiring, and had been given to a gun given to an actor preemptive earlier, let's just say that's an easier word for me, preemptively before the gun was ready. So I think that aspect of this individual has, gives a little bit of context into understanding that, we have a break in the chain in command, and then we also have some repeat offenders in certain situations that haven't followed safety protocol as they should, as what their job entails.
So really a lot of this, number 3 was David Halls. He would be the AD. That was that checkpoint. Okay. So
we call that the industry is the first AD. The first AD.
Okay. So now kind of based on what came out in the weekend, we had reports of, tracing it back now finally to David and his questionable history. Do you think really that is kind of the point where it failed? Do you think that the 24-year-old armorer should be, free of blame or have less blame on this? Where do you stand, being a director yourself and knowing the process very well?
Yeah, so I was just having this private conversation with my girlfriend earlier, and then other film colleagues as well, because we talk about this in our family. From a legal perspective, there are 3 people that are responsible. The production is responsible. So the producers are responsible. Then the armorer would be responsible. The 24-year-old, again, would be responsible. And then the assistant director, David Hall, would be responsible. So it wouldn't fall legally onto just one thing. It would be 3 people, and then it would be up to the state of, in this case, New Mexico, and their laws to adjudicate how much proportional or disproportional responsibility after the affidavits are sworn, as to how much responsibility the state prosecutor
will attribute.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. So, if you break it down to 100%, maybe the production is
40, 20, 20.
Correct.
50, 25, 25. Right.
Correct. And all parties, and here's where the legal issue really comes in. All parties are going to be gunning for themselves, representing themselves. So
that's going to get ugly.
That's right. The production is kind of trying to defend themselves. The armorer is going to try to defend himself, and David Hall is going to defend himself. So the state has to make the decision from an unbiased perspective of who is proportionally and disproportionately responsible.
Not going to be good for David with his prior history in dropping the ball on another set and even getting terminated and fired. That will not be looked upon kindly, I'm sure.
No, that's exactly right. So if you were his defense lawyer, or if you were the prosecutor in this case, as a defense lawyer, they would have a very hard time, because there's a prior incident that shows that this is negligence that's happened before. In the case of the production, I'm not familiar with this specific production company, so I can't comment on it and specifically. And for the armorer, what the prosecutor would try to do is to look at how well he was trained. This individual who was 24 years old, how well he knew his job.
And it was a she, I believe.
She. Yeah. Well, how well she knew her job. So the question comes into clarity of, did they get it? Were they a recent hire? Had they done this previously on other productions? What was her background? How much did she? What was her previous work experience? And so that's going to come into question also into when the legal chips fall and how they start to
Mhm.
deliberate on this case.
So one notable party you did not mention is the actor himself, Alec,
Yeah.
who shot the gun. Is he free from blame? Is he, you know, I know, of course, in the court of public opinion, many have decided to pile on and say, it's his fault. But from a legal standpoint and from understanding how production works, purely innocent on his end. What's your perspective on Alec's
So,
part?
I think there's a very nuanced approach as a director, and having worked with many actors, some famous and some less famous, there is so much that the actor is doing to trust the production, because
Understood.
they're doing their job. They're rehearsing their lines. They're going over blocking. They're coming in. There would be a stand-in for them, so they would be coming in right after. They're preparing themselves for the role, and they have to have a tremendous amount of trust. That trust is set by the director and the assistant director and all the crew members that are there. When
Mhm.
Alec was handed a cold gun and called, and the affidavits have already sworn a cold gun, he's assuming that this gun is able to be fired like every other film that he's been on. So there is the legal culpability is an accident, and an accident that could have happened to anyone, if whether it was Alec Baldwin or a no-name actor. It's not
Mhm.
an Alec Baldwin thing. It's the fact that the gun that was given to him that was called to be already in safety. It was already announced as a cold gun. I think that there is no legal precedence of where they would find him guilty whatsoever in this case.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's address some rumors. There were some rumors that this gun was these guns were put outside because of COVID regulations, and then during this time when they may have assumed it was a cold gun, some of the crew were out horsing around off the set with these guns, and then that's how those bullets ended up there the next day.
Right,
And
right.
obviously they didn't do any checks because they left it where it was last night, didn't think that there was going to be any issue. Came back the next day, they knew they had checked it the night before, but during the time when they punched out of the clock and then punched back in, it was bullets ended up in there. So do you think that's I mean, have what are your thoughts on those rumors or the things that have been said about the theories right now? What are your thoughts?
So I heard this rumor. I heard the same thing that you heard, and that they were left out that overnight and then picked up in the morning, that other crew members were using bullets, and that there was a lock box that was there. And I heard that as well. Um, I have two thoughts on it. The first is, if the crew knows something, put them under oath, and signed affidavits so that it's illegal for them to lie. So that if people were really horsing around, we really get to the bottom of this, not just for the legal sense, but also for Miss Hutchinson's family and for her memory. That's the most important thing. That's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is that if someone who's an armor and a props master, if this turns out to be the case, is not well trained, then they can assume that the blanks, which look similar to the actual guns, to the actual bullets that have gunpowder in them, could have been changed. And so this is
Hmm.
a more nuanced problem. When I read this as well, I read this maybe a few hours ago, this new breaking story that had come out, this rumor that they had been left outside and that there were bullets left outside. So I think we really need to get to the bottom of this. But again, an armor has a set of procedures to fire those guns, to make sure preferably outside, and do checking. You could also check the weight. I mean, I'm not telling them how to.
Yes.
There's a lot of little things that you can do when you're specialized to do this. The weight of the bullet will be much different than a blank. because of the compactedness of the powder that's inside. So anyone who's familiar with firearms would know this. You know, anyone who's gone hunting or anybody who's would have that sense. But an armor, if she didn't know that, and if there wasn't proper training, then there's a lot of negligence to go around on everybody, not only on David Hall, certainly on him, but maybe not solely him.
Yeah, and Stefano, what is that difference in weight? You know, with a gun that has blanks versus one with bullets and gunpowder. What are we looking at? You know, weight wise.
Well, anybody who I'll put it to you in a very colloquial way, like anybody who is let's say a smoker, a pack of cigarettes. It's the difference between, you know, holding, let's say, 10 cigarettes and 1 cigarette. You'll feel it. All right. So it's like a 10-to-1 ratio because that powder is quite thick and it has to be packed. So, you know, someone who's familiar with holding a cigarette in your hand weight wise, you would know the difference between 10 and 1.
So the question is, yes, the armor should have felt that, but shouldn't David Hall have felt that as well?
Oh, well, okay. So let's talk about this. So when David potentially gets the gun as the assistant director, I don't think he's touching the bullets. I think he's handing Alec and calling a cold gun, and he's holding the gun. And he's not conscious of the weight because he's holding the physical pistol itself, right? So you've got those, either you've got live bullets with gunpowder in them or blanks, but then your consciousness focuses on the weight of the gun and not simply the actual bullet. But when the armor and the props master is actually singling out those blanks and those bullets, they're only holding that. And
that's their job.
Exactly.
Their job is to find the weight difference. The AD
Correct,
and
sir.
Alec Baldwin, the actor, should not have to know that nuance, but the armorer should. And what we noticed about the armorer is that she was inexperienced. There's a lot of memes going around, screenshots that she was inexperienced. So now I want to bring the discussion over to the fact that this was kind of a tier 1 low budget movie, basically. Do you think that had something that came into play, that the weakest link here was the armorer that was inexperienced, young, and not understanding of these nuances, and maybe that's where the production company would kind of shoulder some blame, right?
Well, I have a few thoughts on this, Mark, and I'm happy to share them with you. So let me start at the beginning. I think that when production companies have a name like Alec Baldwin, what often happens if they're not rich, if it's not a studio, if it's not Warner Brothers, if it's not Paramount, you know, if it's not MGM, these productions are investing a lot of their money on their name talent, because that's how they're going to get the return back on the film and all the costs. Now, unfortunately, what ends up happening, you can sign a talent name to this, but then the production ends up having challenges on the way because we've allocated a certain amount of money towards this A-lister, right, on these individuals, and now we don't have people that are union, let's say union workers. They're not part of a local 51 or local 62 like here in New York City. They're not necessarily part of the Teamsters. So what happens is that you're trying to make a film within a budget, and that is probably, in my estimation, one of the ways that they had to cut corners. And you see that when the economics of the films are like this, that in this case, someone dies. You know,
that's so sad.
He made this way, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see that in terms of the budget going mostly to the A-list actor, and production has to cut corners to make this happen. And that's why an armor like that got hired, and then the security checks weren't done. It's just a sad situation all around. Thank you for your comprehensive thoughts. I want to wrap this up now, Stefano. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and credibility. Unless you have any more to say, I'd like to give you the floor on that. But otherwise, tell us, about, because you're doing some World War II pieces, I believe, right? And you're also an indie filmmaker, and so you are very familiar with guns on the set.
Correct. Yeah. So I have a current production that is filming at Gold Coast Studios that actually involves weapons and pistols from 1938 to 1942, which would be Subject A Male. That's one production that's currently going on. And that specifically involves a lot of different firearms from different generations. Most recently, myself and co-director Laura Pellegrini have had a film called The Day I Had to Grow Up, on Amazon Prime, that was recently accepted into an Oscar qualifier at the St. Louis International Film Festival. And so we are excited about that. And you can see it on Tubi, Amazon, and Vimeo on demand.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then where can we find you online and follow what you're doing?
That's
Stefano?
right. Yeah. So the handle would be Stefano Defray, STEFANO DAFRE, my full name. And if you want to find out about my production company, Rosso Films International, Rosso like red in Spanish. It's all one word, RossoFilmsInternational.com.
Thank you so much, Stefano. And, we'll hope to